So, Professor Travis, how have you been since we went to Grand Midway?
I haven't been doing a whole lot. Came home, definitely need to unwind from that fun evening we had there at the Grand Midway. Then just kind of stuck in the work a lot as usual. Went into the audio editing for the episode after we recorded it. Still kind of on that. I apologize to all of our listeners. I kind of got pushed back a little bit odd just because getting back into my daily work schedule and everything has kind of become a little troublesome. But I promised you I'll get that out before this episode releases, hopefully.
Man, I'll be kind of fun to release episode 5 before episode 4.
Yeah, we at the Paranormal History Academy can't seem to count very well, I guess. I'm a history professor. What do you want? Math isn't my subject.
Yeah, I deal with paranormal weird stuff that doesn't include math in the slightest.
I don't know. I feel like you'd have a little more math in yours because you gotta there's frequencies, there's a whole lot of
it's numbers, so I guess you can count that as math.
Well, I'd imagine there's physics involved too with some of the things.
Maybe,
so
maybe.
Physics is pretty math heavy.
Something kind of cool was I actually got to go to Trans-Allegheny the other day.
Oh, really? Only 2 episodes after.
Hey man, it's when me and my friend could actually find free time to do it.
Yeah, scheduling those things I know can be a bit difficult.
It was, but it was pretty cool. I'm pretty sure I caught something on camera. I posted it to the Instagram and Facebook. You guys kind of come on there and tell us what you think, because it's weird to say the least.
Yeah, didn't you get it? It almost looks like there's a head poking out behind something there. And I noticed like the hinges on the door are different. They look different.
And I want to kind of clarify, that is the same door and same everything. The hinges somehow went up and down. I don't know how that even happened. And nobody in our group, because there's like 16 of us, I think he said, nobody in that group was that tall.
And now, was that 2 stills of the same video or?
It was 2 stills of the same picture, or 2 different pictures.
Okay.
I wasn't allowed to take video because they don't want you to kind of ruin their tour guide.
Okay.
Which, by the way,
Fair.
I do suggest going there and experiencing it. It is so cool. And there's a lot of stuff that we didn't cover that I really loved.
Okay. Well, what was your favorite part of the tour?
Oh, geez. Going down and seeing the lobotomy room.
Ooh. That's where our favorite doctor went for the gold medal, huh?
Oh, yeah. And it was funny when they mentioned that, his record time was like 10 minutes.
My goodness. Just one after the other, man, like an assembly line. That's so horrible. But I think we should probably get started with the episode.
I think we should too, Professor Travis.
Well, first off, let me be the first to say welcome, everyone, to the Paranormal History Academy.
I am your paranormal researcher, Professor Brandon.
And I'm your resident historian, Professor Travis. We've got a really fun episode today. It's kind of breaking a little bit of the norm of our usual episodes. We're going to be talking about the Lizzie Borden murder. So this kind of delves more into true crime, and we're going to get to the paranormal stuff a little bit later after this episode.
Yes, next episode is going to be more paranormal based, whereas this episode is history and true crime. It's a little bit odd for me because I don't know what I'm doing here anymore.
Oh, don't worry. I'll hold your hand and we'll walk right along this tightrope of history here.
Oh, good. I was scared for a while there.
So it's going to be fun. It's definitely something that's within my wheelhouse. So all of you listening to this, if you want to hear more stuff like this, more true crime-esque, definitely give us an email at paranormalhistoryacademy@gmail.com. We'd love to hear your feedback on it. But before we get into Lizzie Borden, as normal, we need to go into the history of the area, the history of basically this house, and just the whole area of Fall River, Massachusetts. Now, Fall River, Massachusetts is pretty much as old as the United States itself, or the English colonies that settled there. It later became the United States. It kind of borders the Plymouth colony and the Massachusetts colony. So it was slap dab right there. It happened, found an area where literally the river, I have it here, 1 second. I can find it. Pretty much there was a river called where'd it go here? Quickashawn River.
Quickashawn River?
The Quickashawn River, yes.
Who came up with these names?
Well, it's actually based on the Wampanoag tribe.
Now
And
you're
that
just
was
making up words.
no, I swear I'm not. The actual tribe was called the Pokanoket Wampanoag tribe. And I'm probably butchering that because I'm very much not Native American. So I apologize. I'm doing my best.
He's doing his best at making up words, folks. That's all it is.
I'm quite honestly not. But yeah, if you look at this you should see the actual name spelled out without the little linguistic key there. I would have never guessed that it's pronounced Quickashan or Quickashan, but it's like Quequechan. I thought of KK-chan, and I was like, this ain't a Japanese river.
Yeah,
Like,
I was gonna say that's not Japanese.
that sounds something very anime-esque. But it was where the river actually met a waterfall, and they literally named it Fall River because the river falls there. And it started seeing some expansion in the probably late 1600s. We saw that an actual colony formed there. The town started growing. The settlement later started receiving more and more people coming in as they got off the ships in Plymouth Colony, and really just kind of became a nice, peaceful little area in the Massachusetts area, right by Rhode Island.
So when you say peaceful, nothing bad really happened there that much other than what happened with Lizzie Borden?
Not There was some other things that happened later on, not long before Lizzie Borden. If I'm to understand correctly, there was a murder there by a Methodist minister.
Yes. And now this is my chance to butcher a name here because I actually do have his name up here. And it is Ephraim Avery. And
Ephraim.
Ephraim. Okay, thank you. I'm bad.
They normally go by Ephraim, or some people pronounce it Ephraim.
Okay, Ephraim. He actually did supposedly murder a pregnant woman.
Oh, man.
And it actually did kind of bring into effect the, hey, don't judge these people because he was a Methodist minister. He was a person of quote unquote God, and he killed somebody there.
I smell a scandal.
Well, it kind of does tie into Lizzie Borden a little bit.
Yeah, it does kind of tie into a lot because we're going to get into several murders that happened in the area. That murder specifically was almost ruled off as a suicide because she was found in the front yard of a family member's, hanging from a tree with a weighted sack tied to her foot.
How messed up is that?
I'm not very familiar with a lot of this, how to commit suicide, but I wouldn't think tying a heavy sack to my foot would do it. Normally, of my understanding, is you get up on a chair, you kick the chair out from under you. Again, I can't say I'm an expert on suicide by rope, but they've almost ruled it off as a suicide until in her personal effects, there was actually a note saying, if I were to disappear or anything were to happen to me, go to Reverend Ephraim Avery. He'll know where I am. And
I smell a red flag.
Yep. And that kind of led them on the entire route that they took, that ended up discovering that no, this Methodist minister did in fact murder her. But getting into the Lizzie Borden, family and all of their background. So the Bordens are their father, Andrew Borden, correct?
Yes.
Was a fairly successful banker in the area. So
yes, he actually had about $10 million in today's money.
Fairly well off.
Yeah, I'd say he's living pretty nice.
That was of $100 back then, right?
I guess so. But the best part is, though, he lives in this tiny little house. If you look at the Lizzie Borden house, it's not a huge mansion.
If I'm remembering correct, though, it was originally a 2-family house. He ended up buying it for, I think it was like $10,000, or maybe what by today's standards. I never really got a conversion on whether it was then money or now money, but he ended up getting rid of the divider and just made it a bigger home for his family.
Which, I mean, makes sense. You have nice money, so why not have both halves of your house?
Yeah, and the funny thing was, it was just like one street over from the business center of Fall River, Massachusetts. So it was close to probably where his bank was.
Now, when you get into the other people, you have Abby, which is their stepmother, because Lizzie Borden's mother died when Lizzie Borden was very young.
That's where it all
And
starts.
it, the funny thing
She
about,
was killing long before.
I guess so, that's messed up. But something that they kind of mention is that her sister Emma and Lizzie both suspected that Abby was after Andrew's money.
Mm, I could kind of see it. I don't know. I don't have enough background information on her, but when you're dealing with excess amounts of money, that tends to become the case in a lot of true crime stories. Like it
Oh
all
yeah.
revolves around the money.
Well, what really sparked them off to disliking her as well was Andrew bought a house for Abby's sister about like a
Oh,
month before the murder actually happened.
huh.
So it does give a motive, but he was also a banker. So there are a lot of people who don't like him in town already.
Yeah, banks have always kind of had that negative connotation. You know, people get mad. Hey, my loan term's unfair. There's this. Hey, you shorted me out of this money. All kinds of fun stuff. So I could see it.
Now, before we do get into what happened that day, there are two more people who are kind of noteworthy. There's Bridget, who is their Irish servant. She's 26 years old. And there is Alice Russell, who is Lizzie's friend and somewhat Bridget's or somewhat Emma's friend as well.
Now, Alice actually had a pretty big role when it came to the actual investigation of these murders. I just wanted to note because she was not allowed to leave the house while they're investigating because she was a key witness. There's a lot going on. So a lot of things that they reported, which kind of led to compiling a lot of evidence, was from Miss Russell and her goings on in the house while she was kind of detained there.
Didn't she live pretty close to the Lizzie or to the Bordens themselves? So that's why she was more of a key witness.
I believe so. I know she was there the night before up until that day, I believe.
Okay.
So she was there reportedly around the time of the murders. Maybe not exactly at the time, but around it, like close enough to it that would make them, suspicious of it.
Well, Professor Travis, do you want to talk to us about what happened with those murders that day?
Definitely, Brandon. So a lot happened on that fun August day in Fall River. So I want to note that a friend of Andrew, the father's, John Morse, had arrived the evening of August 3rd and was staying in the guest room at the Borden house. He'd stated that he had breakfast with him the next morning with Andrew, Abby, Lizzie, and their maid, Bridget Sullivan. So Morse eventually left and went to go buy oxen to go visit a relative, I believe, that was coming in the Fall River. It was at this time that normally the family did chores. So usually one of the peculiar heck with it, the peculiar bits of this part here. Again, I'm not an English major, so don't hold it to me. Normally, it was Lizzie and Emma's chore to go and clean the guest bedroom, which Morse would have slept in that night previous. So that would have been their job, was to go and clean up that room, make the bed, do all of that fun stuff. Well, instead of them doing it, allegedly Abby was the one that went upstairs between 9 a.m. and 10:30 a.m. to make the bed and clean up the room a bit.
That's a little bit odd that Lizzie and Emma weren't there.
Yeah, it that was one of my first flags here. Is like, well, if that was normally their job, I don't want to connect dots that may not need connecting, but maybe it was possible they intentionally didn't. So she just, I guess I have to do it and go up the stairs and like, I guess I got to make this room, which leads to the next bit because forensic investigators, I swear I'm not talking right today.
You okay?
I'm never okay, but we'll get to that later. Forensic investigators believe that Abby was actually facing the killer when they attacked her. So it could have been talking. So that kind of brings in an era of, well, she definitely knew the person who murdered her. Because, I mean, if it wasn't, it'd be who are you? What are you doing in here? Oh my God, I'm calling the police, or I'm going to get the police, or I'm going to get someone to help because, again, this is the 1800s. Phones weren't a thing.
Not yet.
But so that adds an era of she was intimately familiar with whoever was talking to her. They ended up hitting her in the side of the head by her ear with a hatchet and then striking 17 more blows to the back of her head, which resulted in her death on scene. Apparently, Andrew returned around 10:30. It was believed his key failed to open the door, so he knocked for attention. Sullivan, the maid, went to unlock the door, finding it jammed. I guess she swore or something. And Sullivan reports, hearing that Lizzie was laughing at that expletive, and the laughter was coming from the top of the stairs. So this is another important bit of information in this whole case, as if Lizzie was on the second floor and she laughed at that, she would have been grossly aware of Abby's death, because police investigation state you could be anywhere on that second floor and you would have had direct line of sight of Abby's body in that room, because it was right next to the bed, laying on the floor, obviously tons of blood. That's going to stand out to anyone. So again, this kind of played an important bit, because if she was up there laughing at that, it meant she was upstairs at that time and she was aware of Abby's death. So that we'll put a pin in that. So she ended up denying being upstairs and stated that her father had asked where Abby was. And she then replied that a messenger delivered a summons for Abby to visit a sick friend. So this is the next big thing that kind of incriminates Lizzie in this, is she now deliberately lied to say that Abby wasn't in the home, when she clearly would have known Abby was in the home, because they knew she went upstairs to make the guest bedroom. So this is another big bit of incrimination on her, because it's like, well, you flat out lied, because you definitely knew that she was in the house and that no such messenger appeared, because they confirmed that no such messenger came to deliver a message that Abby should visit a sick friend. Lizzie, in her own statement, said that she had removed Andrew's boots and helped him into his slippers before he laid down on a sofa for a nap, which this contradicts crime scene photos, which when Andrew was dead, he was wearing his boots.
Oh, geez.
So you're telling me this man slipped out of his boots, put on slippers, and then put his boots back on, laid down on the same couch he was murdered on?
Hey, man, I do it too. I take my boots off, put my flip-flops on, then immediately put my boots back on.
It's, again, he was wearing boots. He was found dead on the very couch that Lizzie, in her own statement, said he laid down to take a nap on. So it's another instance of her directly lying to the investigators, lying and making up something that didn't happen. We'll touch more specifically into some of these, because she does change her story a bit. She then informed Sullivan of a department store sale and permitted her to go, but Sullivan felt unwell and went to take a nap in her bedroom. Sullivan testified that she was in her third floor room and she was resting after she was cleaning windows, something like that. She then heard Lizzie call from downstairs, "Maggie, come quick. Father's dead. Someone came in the house and killed him." So this is again where they find Andrew slumped on the same couch he was allegedly taking a nap on, where he was supposed to be in slippers, but instead sleepwalked and put his boots back on. He was struck roughly 10 times with a hatchet, same one that killed Abby. Again, this is another thing where we kind of catch her in a lie, saying someone just randomly came and murdered him and left. Well, if they just randomly came and murdered him and left, why was Abby killed roughly an hour earlier with the same exact weapon? So it comes to we're in a weird crossroads of like, okay, she's given 3 different testimonies and none of them match up with what was found.
Now, at this time, though, they had suspicion that it was a foreigner before they kind of looked inward because Lizzie Borden herself was a Sunday school teacher. And, as we kind of said with Minister
Avery's.
Avery, you don't want to look at that person. You just kind of want to sit there and be like, oh, well, they're a Sunday school teacher. There's no reason to think that.
It kind of comes to my mind here of what the heck was going on with the Christian faith in Fall Rivers.
It's a little weird.
What the heck is going on with
Now
with their Sunday schools here, where a minister hung a woman intentionally that he got pregnant, and a Sunday school teacher is murdering her father and stepmother.
They actually did arrest a Portuguese immigrant at first.
Yes, he was also under suspect of killing another family in Fall River, wasn't it?
I don't know that much about it, but I just know that they did find him innocent. I tried to look up some stuff about who it was, what his name was, and I couldn't find that much about it. They just said he was a Portuguese immigrant and he was found innocent.
Yes, yeah, I know he was acquitted of the charges because they were able to confirm, though, that he specifically was not in Fall Rivers, Massachusetts during the time of the Borden murders.
Which I guess is good. I mean, at least he was found innocent.
Yes.
Poor
yeah.
guy.
I mean, yeah.
Poor guy was probably like, I don't even know who these guys are.
Yeah.
Why are you arresting me?
Poor man that probably only really spoke Portuguese, maybe didn't have a good grip of the English language, like now on trial for murder. Like, what's going on? I don't know what's happening. Who are the Bordens? Who's this man? I don't even bank there.
I don't even go to that bank. He's the Borden Bank. I'm at the United States Bank.
Yeah.
The Portuguese bank, actually.
But after this attack, the maid comes downstairs, fresh blood on Andrew Borden. He's still bleeding, which meant it was immediate. Like, it just happened within probably a few minutes, or I'd say probably within 5 to 8 minutes, depending on how long it takes to swing the hatchet. Probably not long. But he was still bleeding. Dr. Bowen, that was their family's physician, arrived from his home right across the street and pronounced both Abby and Andrew dead at approximately 11 a.m. Or they estimate that Andrew's death was at 11 a.m. They conferred with coroner reports and everything that Abby did die earlier around the 9 a.m. threshold.
And this is where we kind of get to the trials of Lizzie Borden, because she was eventually thought to be the person that killed Emma, or killed Abby and
Well, we're also missing some key points from the actual investigation. So these are just the testimonies of what happened there. So the police actually find several different things. Like, the investigation brings up a lot of new things, as well as the actual murder weapon. So those are key points, especially in Lizzie's statement that some person just randomly came in, murdered them, and left. Because the actual hatchet that was believed to be the murder weapon was actually found in their basement. And it looked like it was deliberately covered in soot and dirt to make it look like it was dusty and had been sitting there a while. But the handle was freshly broken off. So you're telling me that you're just this man that came in, graphically murdered a man, well, first a man's wife, and then somehow stuck around for an hour without being seen, ran in, butchered Andrew Borden, ran out, had time to run into the basement, smother soot and things on an axe, break the handle off, put it away, and run.
Hey, man, I'm not going to sit there and say it's not possible.
I'd say it's a very big stretch, because
it is a very big stretch, but it's not possible. It's not impossible.
Because in my mind, if I was sitting there like Lizzie Borden and, oh my God, this man just came in, butchered my father, ran out the door, and made a hard right into my basement, I'd be like, what's happening here? That guy's still in my basement.
Now, something I do
I would
want
lock
to
the door
kind
on
of,
him. I'd just,
I actually do want to kind of mention here, though, is that at the time, Lizzie herself said she was out in the barn attending to what's ever in the barn when Andrew was murdered.
the other
And
murder victims.
pretty much. And between the time of Lizzie calling for Maggie and the murders was 13 minutes. The police stated it was 13 minutes. And they said nobody could go change clothes and put the axe downstairs, break it, and deliberately put soot on it in 13 minutes.
I kind of have an argument with that because I'd say it's very easy. It only takes 1 or 2 minutes to change if you're really in a hurry, like you just murdered someone and you're like, I got to get out of these clothes.
I don't know.
I'd
Have you
say,
seen those dresses back then?
yeah, but I'd still say maybe 5 minutes. Let's say 5 minutes. Okay. Just to even give them plenty of time. 5 minutes is actually a lot of time to change. And then, okay, next part. Or we can even flop that. She took the hatchet downstairs, broke the handle off, and smothered soot and everything. That's going to take maybe from the time getting from the sitting room where Andrew was murdered outside into the basement. We'll say that's within a minute or two. Broke the hatchet, smothered it in soot really quick. Takes another minute. Gets up, changes. We'll give her 5 to 6 minutes. That's still within the 10-minute mark.
Now, something that is kind of mentioned, though, is that even chemists who found the two axes that Lizzie brought in stated there was no blood on them.
I thought there was very minuscule traces of blood.
That was on the dress that she was wearing.
Okay.
There's minuscule blood on it, but for the axes themselves, they couldn't really find that much blood on them, or there was not blood on them, actually.
Okay, yeah, the hatchet handle, maybe a murder weapon is break, and the handle was fresh, unlike the other blade tools. He has that made it. So, yeah, so then the problem too was that the police kind of blundered and never removed these hatchets from the premises for days. So that would also make time for someone to go down there, clean it off before it even was taken as evidence. So that was kind of a blunder on the police department. But even during the investigation, we still get a lot of instances where Lizzie Borden's answers to their questions were incredibly contradictory. Her first testimony to police saying that she was coming back in from the barn and heard a groan or a scraping noise or a distress call before entering the house. Then even 2 hours later, when they asked her again, she actually told them she heard nothing and didn't even know anything was going on. And that was when she told him, like, oh, well, Abby received a note asking her to visit a sick friend, which could never be corroborated. They were never able to infer that she had any sick friend or was ever told about a sick friend and needed to leave the house. So I think that's one of the biggest and most damning pieces against her, is that flat out lie, as well as the change in story.
Now, there was an excuse for the change of story, supposedly, and that was that the family doctor prescribed her morphine to help her sleep at night. Granted, I mean, you can kind of see that where both your parents were brutally murdered, you're not going to sleep right for the next couple nights. And morphine does kind of mess with you big time.
It does, but the morphine was after the fact. These questions and these contradictory stories were just within hours of the murder happening. So it was literally the police questioning her when they got on scene. She said, oh, yeah, I heard this scraping and a noise or distress call, and went in. And then 2 hours later, asked her again. She said, yeah, no, I didn't hear nothing. So that was even before the morphine came into play. That was even before the doctor even prescribed her anything to help her with this. So it hits that, well, you're directly lying. And really, according to, I don't think they really had a coroner at the time. They just probably had Dr. Bowen. But from the time she was first hit and then hit on the ground, she couldn't have made a distress call. She was dead. I mean, you'd think on just the second or third hit, you're done with a hatchet. In the back of your head, you're dead. You're gonna die.
a hatchet to the side of the face probably will kill you, especially if it hits
But
a temporal bone, you're dead.
yeah, and it falls into the, if she would have heard a distress call or a scraping noise or anything like that, it would have indicated that she had moved after hitting the ground or after getting hit with the axe. The investigation concluded that the second she was hit in the head the first time, like right at the ear, she fell down on the floor right where her body lay and did not, she had not moved from the time she was hit and fell. So she couldn't have cried out. She couldn't have done anything because she didn't have the ability to. And like I said, her death was so quick that she wouldn't have been able to. So again, this is another a fallacy that comes into play from her statement, just not matching any of the evidence.
What I do find kind of odd, though, is that Maggie was outside. She was actually cleaning the windows when this was happening, and she really didn't report that she heard anything. Like, she didn't report that she heard anything, which is weird to me because I know if I hear somebody fall in my house and I'm outside, I hear it.
Yeah.
You hear the earth shake when somebody falls.
Especially in an old house like that.
Oh, yeah.
When someone hits you hear someone taking 2 steps out of the second floor room and you're out in the front yard, you'll probably hear it.
And I'm not going to sit there and say she was a heavier set woman. I think she was actually fairly skinny.
Yeah, from the photos, she wasn't.
Even if you're 80 pounds,
woman.
we'll say, and that's very light for a normal person, for a normal adult woman. If you're 80 pounds, that is still 80 pounds hitting the floor dead weight.
Yeah, I mean, look at the Grand Midway Hotel when we were there.
Oh my goodness.
That place was built in 1890 after, around the time that this happened. 1892 was when these murders happened. You shift your weight from one foot to another, you hear it. Someone's hearing it.
We would hear people coming from upstairs on the 3rd floor, coming downstairs, and we could hear them perfectly.
Yeah, it was...
So it's
the houses were built in the way that you heard everything. But yeah, I agree. If what happened that Lizzie stated happened, there's no way that the maid wouldn't have heard it.
Which is very odd to me that the maid never really said anything about that. And furthermore, somebody hitting something with an axe, it does make a sound. You will hear it. And again, those houses, you hear almost everything happening in those houses. So it's kind of weird to me that you didn't hear the father being killed. She was up in the attic at the time.
Yeah. Well, that also is another thing here, actually talking about that attic guest room, because a friend of Lizzie and Emma's, Alice Russell, stayed that night, the night following the murders, saying that Morse spent the night in the attic guest room, contrary to later accounts that he slept in the murder site guest room.
I don't think you'd want to sleep in the murder room.
Yeah,
that's obstruction of evidence, number 1. Number 2, that's just weird.
Yeah, hey, Abby was just murdered in this room. I'm gonna go to bed in here. Bed's a bed.
Blood is probably fresh. I mean, if you look at the photos, the blood's everywhere. It is not any. So that's weird.
And it gets more into now police statements, because police were stationed all around the house that night. So like they were everywhere canvassing the area because they wanted to see, because at this point, Lizzie was the lead suspect in this. They're like, well, okay, your statements aren't matching. Nothing's falling in the way that you're saying it is, or you're saying that it happened.
I understand we said that a Portuguese immigrant was arrested. Lizzie was the only one to stand trial for these murders, though.
Yes. Yeah. So being arrested for it doesn't mean that you are really, it doesn't mean you're guilty of it. It doesn't mean that. It means you can be charged, but those charges can be dropped.
And he was found innocent because there was no way he could do any of this.
So he was arrested, or I guess detained would be the better word in this case, because he wasn't officially charged with anything. He was just a key suspect in these murders because of just things fell in just the wrong way for this poor man. And so it got into, again, he was arrested. They're trying to figure it out. They ended up finding he had a solid alibi, and they dropped the charges on him. That's as simple as it is. because there's many, many steps to the judicial process, especially when a murder happens. Yeah, Lizzie Borden was the only one that was officially or was charged in an official capacity for these murders and stood trial.
Now, at one point, she actually was arrested, and even the judge said she was likely guilty. The thing was that a bunch of actually some females came along and said, hey, she wasn't in a trial or jury of her own peers because women couldn't vote, therefore they couldn't stand in the jury. So they actually kind of did another retrial.
Which, honestly, that is something that could have been brought to the Supreme Court. And because that's actually been a very, very big practice by people to kind of split hairs in the judicial process, saying, oh, well, this person's of this ethnicity, this person's of this gender, they need to stand trial in front of a jury of all women or of all Native Americans or all this. But that's not what constitutionally it means. It just means a jury of your peers, meaning American citizens. Oh. That's all it means. People of your town, your municipality, of your local community, that's who has the ability to judge you innocent or guilty.
The group was the Women's Christian Temperance Union. So they were definitely trying to look out for Christian women, much like what Lizzie was, being a Sunday school teacher and all.
Yeah, and that's, I think it was a key fact to her actually eventually being acquitted of these charges, but it just reeked of politics with that. Like, oh, we're not doing this because we believe she didn't do it. We're doing it because there's a political stance to be made here.
Plus, they did kind of have a lack of evidence because a couple days or the Sunday after the murders, Alice was said to have seen Lizzie burning the dress. Supposedly that was stained with paint, but could have been stained with blood.
That's another bit there. Is like, oh, it's just paint. Are you sure? What have you been painting since your parents' murder?
Well, it could have been a little bit before then. Even then, it's still kind of weird. I mean, I've seen what blood looks like on clothing, and it's not
it's set. Yeah, it's definitely not paint. It's more of a rust color.
It's a rust color, but even then, you won't mistake it for paint.
Yeah,
it is a rusty orange, brownish. It's weird.
You note, but that's another thing that I actually think that, in my personal opinion, don't count this as fact, I think Alice was kind of in on a lot of this, because there's even reports by the police that were stationed around the Borden house the night of the murder that Alice and Lizzie were both seen going into the basement where that hatchet was. He didn't know what they were doing for like an hour. They both came up, and then Lizzie went back alone, and he said he stated seeing her, it looked like she was bent over a sink washing something. And that's the basement where the murder weapon was found.
That's kind of weird.
Or the suspected murder weapon was.
Now, I've been very trying to be against Lizzie being the murderer, but even that is something that's very weird. It's still obstruction of evidence, and though she did get acquitted and it was a lack of evidence found, it's still kind of weird that they saw her washing something.
My thing is, too, they acquitted for quote-unquote lack of evidence, but as far as late 1800s standard for trial, I say they had more than enough evidence. Because now, in today's judicial process, you have circumstantial evidence and you have concrete evidence. You have, oh, I actually have the murder weapon. Okay, I have DNA on it. I have these things that can directly link a person directly to this murder. But you can build cases on circumstantial evidence like this. You can build cases on, she was seen coming back from the barn and into the house at the time Abby was murdered, and she was believed to be the only person inside the house. And she was the last person to actually have interacted with Andrew when he was murdered.
Now, don't forget that.
Now her statements of actually helping him and what she did with him are proven false. That's some strong circumstantial evidence to say, without a reason of a doubt, we can probably say that she did murder Andrew and Abby.
don't forget though, the judge did say she was probably guilty.
Yeah.
And that's not enough to sit there and say they're guilty. There was a lack of evidence, so they couldn't say it, but the judge believed they were guilty at heart.
Yeah, I think this whole thing fell into also with the activist groups that got involved in this and the national attention this drew. It almost feels to me, again, you can't really quote me on this. I don't know, but they could have stacked a jury because they're like, well, this is bringing negative press to our town. Activist groups can be like, well, again, they're saying, no, this isn't truly a jury of her peers. A jury of her peers needs to be Christian women, which what are they going to do? They're going to try and make it seem like Christianity or people of the Christian faith can do no wrong.
Which is completely
this is a day and age where you stuck to your own. Everyone within that group or community, they stuck together because they didn't want outside interference. They probably didn't want that attention. So I honestly, in my personal opinion, think that, yeah, they loaded a jury to acquit her. So it wasn't oh, look at this lady from our town. She murdered her parents. Oh, she was a member of this church. Now that church is getting bad press. And it just started, it wouldn't have really done anyone any good.
Now, one of the cool things, though, is that I just recently found out that they still do try and study this in some of the law schools. And, like, it's still a very famous case. Yeah, so the aftermath of it really did kind of help us learn what to do for some of these weird cases like this.
I do also want to double back for a minute because we did skip over a very, very, I think, damning event and kind of help shed light on like, I think Lizzie really did this because she was reported the day before the murders going to a drugstore and buying, is it hydrocyanic acid in diluted form from a local drugstore. She came out and stated, oh, well, I was going to use it. I think it was to clean some furs. But the actual druggist himself even stated, and the medical examiner stated that hydrocyanic acid in no way has any antiseptic or cleaning properties. You can't use it to clean anything. It's a fairly potent poison, though.
Do you know what it is?
I feel like you do know.
It's cyanide.
Yeah.
That's what it is. Hydrocyanic acid is pretty much cyanide. It's found in apples, but it's not
in such small doses.
Well, yeah, but it's still not used to clean anything.
Yeah.
Which is it's still an odd little thing.
If my memory's striking me correct, you'd buy that to put in traps in your yard to kill rodents and kill other creatures. Like, hey, these coyotes are coming around. I'm going to put some food there, put this cyanide hydrocyanic acid on it and kill those pests that are coming around and tearing things up.
Yeah. So like, there's no real reason to say it's for cleaning.
Yeah. So I say that's a very damning piece of evidence on her part because it's like you specifically went and bought poison, even though they weren't poisoned to death. It shows the intent. It shows that you now have intent to poison something or someone.
I will say when trying to figure this out, I was like, okay, can't be used for cleaning or anything. Unfortunately, Lizzie, it couldn't be, and its really main purpose is for poison. Yeah, maybe a little bit sad, not gonna lie.
Again, it shows intent. It shows that she had the intention of killing someone or something. It was never seen that she, if she was there to kill some animals or some pests, I mean, the pests not being her parents, it was never stated. So it alludes that she didn't have the intent to kill any rodents or other animals that were getting on the property. So she clearly, it can be construed that she had the intent to kill Andrew and Abby with it or kill someone with it.
And once again, we do want to say that she was acquitted from the trial. She actually was found not guilty, even though the judge did say she was likely guilty or probably guilty.
Which it does go to stand because the judge can't determine guilt or innocence. It has to be a jury. When it stands jury trial, the jury is the one that makes it. The judge can feel that, yeah, I believe you did it, but
they can't do anything.
Yep. And she couldn't have even been retried after that. That's,
double
that
jeopardy.
Innocent. Yep. They have a right against double jeopardy in the United States, so you can't be tried for the same crime twice.
Which, I mean, makes sense, but in this case,
It is
if they
there is so much politically charged intent, both by activist groups, by the church, by the community as a whole, that it just I feel like a legitimate trial was kind of an impossibility at that
oh
point.
yeah. Now there was some stuff that kind of did spark even more suspicion afterwards, wasn't there, Travis?
Yeah, Lizzie and her sister, like not long after the trial ended, they used a large portion of their inheritance to buy a mansion in the Fall River area. Like it was a big, like Victorian style mansion. I think it's an equivalent to $890,000 in today's standard.
Okay, just barely any money.
So a just under $1 million mansion. Like they were quick to spend that inheritance, like quick to just get right on there. Like I want to buy a big old house.
I mean, obviously that's what you do. You're grieving, you just buy a big old house.
Yep. I mean, I guess. But
Now,
yeah, a really interesting case, and like you said, it's still discussed today. There are other like writings and things on it that have been done on here. I know that there is a book that came out in 1967 that tried to allude that Lizzie did commit the murders, but she was in a fugue state. But there was no such indication of that severe of a mental illness. I know that people did believe she had some form of schizophrenia.
Which they did, but there wasn't enough hard, concrete evidence to show that she did.
I mean,
so it was kind of
If you allude back to our episodes on the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, you know that mental health was pretty archaic back then. The diagnoses and the actual belief of mental health and mental illness was almost non-existent.
Yeah. So there was not really much evidence to go off of either, though. And if you had schizophrenia, even then you would be able to tell. So it's kind of
It depended on the severity of schizophrenia, because schizophrenics are known to have episodes where they are in kind of a fugue state, because schizophrenia, for any of you who are not really aware of this mental illness, it's a kind of illness where you have a hard time distinguishing between what's real and what isn't. So sometimes if you dream at night, you could wake up and think that actually happened. Or I know some schizophrenics like to make up scenarios in their head, and then they can't distinguish between whether it's made up or it's real. They end up developing a paranoia of it, thinking, oh no, this really happened. I can't, oh God, what do I do? And you get into those episodes where they do, like maybe she was in a fugue state and murdered her parents, but wasn't realizing that she was actually doing it. Maybe she thought she was imagining it or dreaming it.
Even then, though, there'd be other accounts of her having those episodes. From what I was researching, there are no other accounts of her doing anything like that before or even afterwards. She lived to be, in her 60s, I believe?
And never had anything afterwards, at least reportedly, because she may not have necessarily had episodes beforehand, because schizophrenia and other mental illnesses don't always
they don't show themselves right away.
Yeah,
they take time.
Could have been like oh dang, this is now happening. It just it could have even been little bits of stories or things she did that just no one connected to being us, because again, mental illness was something that was just swept under the rug back then.
Even then, though, there's nothing that really points to it, and that's what not gonna lie, I did try and find stuff to try and maybe give her a side to talk on.
Yeah,
there was nothing.
Yeah, it's just like I said, there's some books that are made. That one tried to suggest the fugue state. There's another one that stated that Lizzie was having an affair with their maid, Miss Sullivan, and that the mother caught them and she murdered Abby and then confessed to the dad. The dad, reacted as was natural at the time and murdered him. But again, these are all just gross speculations. You can't. There's nothing to back that up. There's nothing to even rationally draw a dot, line to the dots in that.
At this time, though, we do kind of want to say, hey guys, thank you for listening to another episode of the Paranormal History Academy. And also get ready for next week, or next episode, I should say, because we are going to go over the paranormal side of this. There are reports of paranormal stuff happening, so it's going to get kind of weird with that. I know it's weird.
This is going to be fun. I'm excited. This is our first 2-part episode, so I'm really excited to see how this ties together. But again, as Brandon said, thank you all so much for listening. This has been the Paranormal History Academy.